For a lot of folks, when they give feedback, it is stress inducing and it is anxiety producing. Because the only person who dislikes getting feedback is the person who has to give it. The idea that when we give feedback, we need to approach with empathy and understand how is it that this other person wants to receive that feedback from us. Because we may have the right message and we may have the right delivery and we may have the right tone, but if it's not structured in a way that's going to resonate with that other person, then it's still not going to go anywhere or have the desired impact. As a boss, asking your team, what's the best way for me to share feedback with you? Do you like having sort of these quick hits in the hallway? Well, I'm going to drop by your desk. Do you like it over email? I mean, these are all things that different clients of mine have done with their teams, and they all work great, but they all work differently.
You specialize in feedback. What drew you to the psychology of feedback? I mean, it's such an interesting dynamic and a super interesting niche to me. One that a lot of people struggle with. What was the draw for you when you got into this space?
Really, it was about self-correction. I was at a point in my life and in my career where I really wasn't interested in listening to what other people had to say about me. And so I preferred to just go about my life thinking that everything was just fine. And in reality, it was not. And I was blind to those blind spots. And it was only when things really took a turn for myself professionally that I realized I needed to listen more deeply and care more personally. And thanks to a really close friend who asked me a simple question one day, Joe, who do you want to be? That I started really thinking about that question and thinking about what I could do to become someone who was more aware, but also engaged in the feedback that was all around me that I just didn't want to let in. And I spoke about this at TED, and I eventually made it a sort of a mission for myself to understand the underpinnings of high performance feedback, of what were the qualities that allowed someone to not only give really good feedback, but also receive it fearlessly. And that became my life's mission and work. Now I talk about it and write about it and help others become fearless as well.
So what have you found? What are some of the reasons that people struggle with that feedback loop, with the ability to both give and receive? I mean, I've always had zero problem giving it as a leader. I've always been someone who is willing to share. I just believe in factual conversations, honesty, integrity. And so if someone is asking me something, I'm going to give them positive feedback. It may be some negative feedback as well, but it's a negative to them, meaning they might not be taking it as perfect, but it's to help them get to wherever they're trying to go. Receiving it has not always been something that was easy. And the more mature and older I got, the better it was, but it's always something that people struggle with. What do you think? What have you found through your research and your years of study?
So there's really three issues that affect the giving side of it. And it sounds like, you have the courage and the commitment to help others do better. And so you giving that feedback, it comes from a good place. But for a lot of folks, when they give feedback, it is stress inducing and it is anxiety producing. Because the only person who dislikes getting feedback is the person who has to give it. And that's what the research makes clear, that by almost a 2-to-1 margin, people are reluctant to share feedback. Forget about the people who are resistant to the message. They don't even want to give it because they're afraid of the impact that it will have on others, the impact on the relationship, the impact on how they're perceived as a leader, if they're giving it as a leader to a report, or the impact on the relationship. And so what they end up doing is dodging or disguising that conversation, that piece of feedback, or diluting it to a point where it almost doesn't exist, where it's tucked in between two praises, praise sandwich, or it's skirted altogether. So there's a fear of sharing, but there's also an issue related to the timing and the delivery. Okay, so for some folks, even once they've sort of brought themselves to the point where they can give it, they're not giving it in a timely way. So they let a lot of time pass before the feedback is actually shared. So there's this huge gap between what's happened and what's being discussed. And the longer the wait, the shorter the memory, right? And so if you have some feedback to share with me and you take 3 weeks, a quarter, even longer to share it, and I don't know what's going on, then the issue, by the time we finally getting around to talk about it, has passed and or hardened and set, and it's impossible to deal with anymore. But it's also the delivery itself that oftentimes when people are sharing feedback with others, they're more interested in telling and selling and not listening and learning. My job when I am supposed to give feedback, I think, is to tell you what I think and to sell you on what I believe is happening. Because I operate with the assumption that I know everything and that it's my job to tell you about it. When in fact, that's really very often not the case. There's so much that's going on behind the scenes or in the background that no one is always fully aware of. And so if I approach with a tell and sell mentality, that becomes very fear producing for the and anxiety producing in the other person. So as a giver, we really need to stop and ask ourselves, what are my goals here in sharing this feedback? What are my intentions? What's my approach? Because if my goal here is to fix you and not to frame an issue, then I'm probably not going to get very far. And I'm probably going to end up creating more resistance and opposition in the other person than if I were to just approach with more curiosity and humility. And going back to what we were saying before about this culture first approach to building teams, every feedback conversation is an opportunity to build trust, to create a culture of fearless feedback. And the way you do that is by approaching with more curiosity and less certainty. So if I go into these conversations thinking, I know everything and I'm here to fix you, then you're probably not going to get very far. But if you approach a conversation saying, I want to frame an issue, I want to invite your participation and input, and then I want to see if we can move forward together on a shared understanding of what ought to happen next. That's a different conversation. That's a different tone. That's a different result. So it's really about how we approach the conversations, how we size them, how we share them, and ultimately how we scope it. So is it about me or is it about us?
Yeah, and it's funny when I think about being a leader early in my career, being so results oriented. For me, the feedback was based on the result. It was how do we get better? How do we make everything that I was working on constantly was how to be better. I'm a make it better kind of guy. I can go into a restaurant and I'll find 10 things that we need to do better in that restaurant. It could be the first time I've ever gone and I'll be like, man, if they did this in their bathrooms, if the host was just doing this when we walked in, like these are the ways. It could be a 9 out of 10 restaurant, but I'm still looking for little ways to tweak and make it better. And so early in leadership, when it came to feedback, I think a lot of the feedback was results driven towards what the goal was, and the goals aren't always aligned. My goal may not be aligned with the team's goal, and having to connect those dots are important as I got further along and led bigger teams and eventually companies. One of the things that I found was addressing it from their perspective, meeting them where they were at right there, and helping them in that moment versus coming to you and saying, hey Joe, are you trying to get better at this, or are you just gonna suck at it forever? Or
Right.
instead of which I could have done, which is, hey Joe, I know that you constantly are trying to get better, and I failed at this so many times in my career. And early on, here's a couple of mistakes I was making. What I learned was this, and I think if this tweak happens, this might help you do more of what your objective are. If that's the objective, if we're working together. So is that a better approach, or how do you find that from your connectivity?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, feedback is more than just a rating. It's more than just a report. Feedback is a relationship. It's a way to have a relationship with the people that matter most to us, to talk about the things that matter most to us. And with all relationships, it really has to be about partnership. We have to put partnership over power. Too often, power finds its way into these conversations. What I, as your boss, am going to tell you to do better, what I, as the customer, am going to tell you, as the restaurant owner, to do better to improve your service. But ultimately, when we level that field and we create a dynamic of partnership and shift from here's what I'm going to do to you to here's what I'm going to do for you and with you. That's a whole other dynamic to feedback that changes the outcomes and the opportunities. So I think if we look at feedback as something to do with another person, for another person, as opposed to another person, ultimately that's when we can have the conversations that really matter with the people that matter most.
Something we did in our company that I think you'll find interesting is we were doing, as our company grew, we were doing performance reviews. You know, you start to have to do things that you didn't always do because it was more in the moment when you're small and you're building. And then, you know, excuse me, then as the year goes on, you get to a point where you know, your team is goes from 10 to 20, 20 to 40, and you're now having to schedule these reviews or performance connections or some kind of evaluation because people want to talk about the next year, they want to talk about the future. And we were doing a planning session with my COO, and my COO says, Scott, we we talk about life all the time, and we've built great relationships with all of our people. Like, we have special relationships. They tell us things that most companies don't. Every Monday we have a Monday morning huddle where we 9:30 in the morning, the whole company gets on a Zoom and we talk about what we did over the weekend and share our family stories and wins and challenges on Friday for 30 minutes. It's life first all the time. Why don't we take the life model that you've been teaching and coaching everywhere else and incorporate it into our performance model? And I was like, that's perfect. It's so simple. So we train the whole team on the life model. We ask everybody if they want to. They don't have to do it. So they don't have to share anything about their personal life if they don't want to, but we give them the ability to go through this entire routine. And we did like 30 performance reviews that weren't performance reviews at all. They were connections about their life and what their goals were and what they were trying to achieve and how this career could actually help them get there. And so now it wasn't about this transactional feedback. It was about relationships and us understanding deeper what they're trying to accomplish and them sharing more of themselves so we understood it. I mean, we learned so much, and it was such a powerful shift in our company.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a transaction, right? It can be a transformation if we do it right. And it sounds like the thing that really set this apart for folks was realizing that feedback wasn't just an opportunity for the boss to show someone how much they know, it was an opportunity to show how much they care. And when you make that very important shift from showing how much you know to showing how much you care, then feedback becomes a conversation and it becomes a relationship. And you realize that the other person has your best interests at heart. And even though the conversation may touch on pieces of your work that are personal or not necessarily up to par and
Right.
are in need of some correction, that correction comes from a great place. It's like when I give my kids feedback, they know I love them and they know I care about them and would do anything for them. So, when I share that feedback with them, or when my wife shares that feedback with them, or when my wife shares that feedback with me, we know that because it's relationship first, results follow. And that's the way to change the dial on all these conversations. Really show how much you care. And there's ways to do that. And it's one of the things I do when I teach companies how to actually have these conversations in a more caring, connected, candid way. Is to show them that you don't have to hold back to move someone forward. You can help people where they are right now and help them be the best version of who they can be if you have the courage to be candid, to be clear, and the commitment to help them move forward together.
Yeah, it's great. So how old are your children now?
So we have a nice little range here. We've got two teens. One is about to turn 20, so he's almost out of his
Okay.
teens, that's a whole nother
Yeah.
world. I'll tell you, that's, as you know, you're there. That's a whole nother world. We have another one who's 18, another who's 14, and another who is 12. So
So the feedback becomes harder though as they get
it,
older, right?
yeah,
Because they start to forget that your love and
Yeah.
affection and everything's coming from a place of love. That is a hard thing once they start hitting 14,
Yeah.
15, 16.
Yeah. No, absolutely right. So the thing I found with giving feedback to teens is that and this is probably true with giving feedback to adults too, right? Is you want to preserve their autonomy and you want to preserve their sense of self. You want to give them control over what happens next, and you don't want to make them feel badly about themselves in the process. So nothing is more tone deaf to a teenager than saying, I know better than you and do what I say, right? They're not
Right.
listening. They're not. So if you approach with something like, hey, uh, I noticed something, and here's why I want to bring it to your attention, because I care about you and I care about this thing. And I want to make sure that we both are giving our best to this particular issue, or that we're dealing with this issue in a way that, suits both of us. Um, Describe what happens, what's been happening, my reason for caring. And then from there, so what do you think? And leaving feedback at that point of, okay, well, what do you think? So what do you think should happen next? That's an empowering statement that often is not part of the feedback conversation, right? If you're telling and selling someone on what you think should happen next, you're prescribing, you're not describing. You're telling them on what should happen. You're not listening to what they think should happen. And this really fails because everyone at the end of the day has a drive to be in control of their own self and their own destiny and their own next steps. And when we feel like we're surrendering that control to someone else, it feels very defeating and deflating. And that doesn't feel good. That's not a place of strength. That's not a point of progress. So whether you're talking to a teen or to someone on your team, preserve people's dignity, their standing, and make them feel like they're part of that process. And you can still, as the leader or as the parent, exert a measure of control and not surrender your position in these conversations. Because when you act as a partner, you're not making yourself less. You're actually making yourself appear more in the eyes of the other person. Because if you care enough about another person to listen to what they have to say and to invite them into this conversation to offer their suggestions on where to go next, that's going to build respect. It's going to signal trust, and ultimately it's going to deliver results.
I think I think that's great, and I think it's a really important point. What I found is with my 19-year-old, who's very similar in personality. He does really good when I leave him voice texts or a quick video when he's at college, or he recently tore his ACL, and that's a really all of his buddies just started back in the season,
That's
and
rough.
so
Yeah.
he was going back a starter, had it set up, and he's going through a tough challenge. And as a parent, some of the things that will help them through it, but you can't press. You have to let them kind of figure it out. And so I'll let him go a little bit of time where I feel like maybe he's doing it his way. And then like yesterday, I left him a quick video and I was like, all right, good morning. I know you haven't even woken up yet, but you're going to get this when you wake up. Let me tell you these three things that I think are important. And, I just went through a couple things. I really want to see you achieve what you want to achieve, whatever that is. And I'm going to be here to do it. And here's how, if I need to leave you a message every morning, I'll leave you a message every morning, buddy. And I just kind of like gave it to him, and he received it very well. Now, if I went into his room and was one-on-one with him,
Sit him down on the bed and let's have a heart-to-heart talk.
he's
Right.
going to
Yeah.
shut down. He's going to
Yeah.
shut down immediately because now I'm asserting my power. He has to sit there because I'm dad. And that already feels uncomfortable. And so I really try to find ways to communicate. My youngest son is totally different. And you have four. So, I mean, you're in a position where all of them are different. I've never seen it where they're the same. There's always a little tiny different, just like our employees, just like our teammates, just like our partners. And, but
Same
how we
ingredients, different recipe,
same ingredient, but you have to come up with some kind of way to
Yeah,
meet them where they are. And
totally.
and it really, I fail all the time at it, but I do my best.
You said something really important just now. the idea that when we give feedback, we need to approach with empathy and understand how is it that this other person wants to receive that feedback from us. Because we may have the right message and we may have the right delivery and we may have the right tone, but if it's not structured in a way that's going to resonate with that other person, then it's still not going to go anywhere or have the desired impact. So you asking your son, what's the best way for me to share feedback with you? Or as a boss, asking your team, what's the best way for me to share feedback with you? Do you like having sort of these quick hits in the hallway? Well, I'm going to drop by your desk. Do you like it over email? Would you prefer that we do it sitting down face to face? Do you want to leave the office and go for a walk? I mean, these are all things that different clients of mine have done with their teams, and they all work great, but they all work differently because people are people and feedback is a people game. And so unless we really treat people as people and understand their needs, wants, desires, and hopes, then we can't really break through. So the first step in having these fearless conversations is to really, like we've been saying, put the relationship before the rating, put the relationship before the report, put the person at the center of this conversation. And if you do that, if it's people first, then it's progress second.
Yeah, it's amazing how relationships far outweigh transactions, and every time you lean into them, the result is much more significant and successful than if you're just going in as a taker for the transaction.
Totally.
Yeah, it is interesting, and I think with children and family members, it's probably even more unique with your spouse because they're going off of old information coupled with new information. And if you've been married long enough, there's a lot of both. So sometimes you're delivering something and you're like, this is not me from 20 years ago. This is me today. They're two different versions. Let me explain this in a different way. And they're hearing it as like a 19-year-old, the way that you started dating back in the old days. And it's really, really funny. And the older we get, the more we get in sync with that relationship and that communication, even understanding when you mentioned timing. And I love the point on timing, because I think in relationships, especially in marriages, so often the timing's off. It's not the message. It's not the discussion. It's that we just tell each other something at the wrong time. We're so unaware of what's happening in that other person's life that we think, oh, it's the right time for me, so I'm going to go ahead and talk about this. And that's another example that I know bosses do. I know dads and moms do, and I certainly know spouses do.
Yeah. Asking that question, is it a good time for us to talk about this now? And if not, when's a good time for us to talk about this? Is really crucial as a foundational step, right? Setting these conversations for success, setting them up for success from the start. And so, yeah, that's true whether you're talking to a loved one or to someone you work with. Just again, the first thing you can do to signal that you're approaching as a partner is just to ask them the very basic question: when is this good for you to talk about? When's a good time? I want to talk about something. Is now good. The next question to ask, especially if you're on the receiving end of that conversation, like let's say your spouse approaches you and says, "Hey, can we talk about something? I have something I want to share with you." Or an employee approaches their boss and says, "Hey, I want to talk about something with you." The next question you should ask is, well, what do you need from me in this conversation? Do you want me to listen? Are you looking for sympathy? Or are you looking for solutions? Do you want me to coach you or to correct you? What do you need from me in this moment so that I can be most helpful to you in this conversation and to be of service to you in this conversation? Because if feedback is that relationship building tool that we're talking about it being, then one way to build relationships is to really start with understanding. What can I do to help you? What can I do to support you? What do you need from me in this conversation? And it's just a human thing to do. It's a human thing to ask. And so, Scott, I feel like feedback is sometimes complexified. I'm not trying to dismiss the very real concerns that people feel going into those conversations, I know them all too well. I hear about them all the time from the people I work with. I see it on the faces of the people that I speak for. But we're really making feedback more complex than it needs to be. Feedback is about being a good listener who's curious and humble and caring. And if you can sort of hit all three of those things, curiosity, humility, and caring, then it really takes care of most of the work. Because then feedback is just a conversation between two people between whom there is some, hopefully, level of trust, respect, and understanding. And that goes a long way towards making these conversations less fearful and more human.
Yeah, I've got my Ted Lasso "Believe" poster behind me,
There you
and
go.
"Be curious, not judgmental" is
Yes.
one of my favorite things that he says, and I think it's just great. It's great um, to think about how you are trying to help that person and what they need. It's funny. I think I could have used that the first decade or so of our marriage, where, as a young man, all you're trying to do is fix whatever problem they're presenting. And all they wanted to do was talk about the problem. Especially my wife's a school teacher. And so all of the problems in the schools are completely unfixable. There's never going to be a change. Like it's the hierarchy is broken, the deliverables are broken, the relationships are like all over the place. And I would always be like, "Well, here's what we're going to do." And and she'd be like, "Well, I'm not going to do that."
Right.
And so years later, it was more, I learned the listening tactic, and that was a much better seek first to understand than
Yeah.
to be understood, right?
Yeah.
Stephen Covey.
Yeah. I just want you to listen to me right now. I don't want you to fix anything. Just listen. And that's,
So
yeah,
hard.
that would probably, they should probably teach that before you step up to the altar. You should probably learn that lesson first.
I think they probably do. I think
Yeah.
so many people are no longer going to the premarital trainings because, we used to be so accompanied with the churches too that you had to go through. If you were, we got married in the Catholic Church, we had to go through a session, had to fill out all these questionnaires. And I mean, we did walk out a couple nights and we were like, wow, there was a lot of stuff we didn't
That's a
think
lot of
about.
stuff. Yeah. And
Yeah.
and a lot of it you learn over time, right? You're learning the person, you're refining that relationship, and a lot of the stuff just kind of gets worked out in the course of all the fits and starts of a relationship, whether that's marriage or a work relationship. But at the end of the day, if people would approach with a willingness to learn and a willingness to commit their best selves to the other person's best interests, then we'd fix a lot of these problems from the start.
How important is self-confidence? I mean, when you think about this, I feel like the people that struggle with feedback the most, including myself at times in my life, especially early on when I was trying to get my footing and figure out who I was, where I belonged, where I was heading, there's a lot of insecurity. And the more I worked on me, the more I went on that personal growth journey, the more I, dug into what made me strong, my unique ability, and developed that, the less I had a hard time with receiving feedback. And I wonder how that touches people.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think self awareness is probably the secret sauce of receiving feedback well. And unfortunately, most of us are just not all that self aware. So there are things that we can do to try to bring more awareness to ourselves. And these are things that I've tried myself and the research supports as well. So the first is kind of, you know, fact check your feelings. So you're feeling one way, but the facts really just don't support that, right? So if you get a piece of negative feedback, ask yourself, okay, is this happening a lot? Is this happening more than I'd like to admit? Is this person completely off here? And sometimes we can't easily separate facts from feelings because the feelings are raw, they're real, they're heavy. So the next thing to do is to reach out to a trusted friend, colleague, loved one, someone who is willing to give you the raw and real feedback about yourself that you need, but may not be prepared to hear, and to ask them, to sort of widen the lens for you and help you find that signal in the noise. Because when we're stuck in the jar, we can't read the label, right? So turn to the people that can help you make sense of that message and find the truth signal. And then lastly, one thing that is probably counterintuitive, but I found to be really effective, is that after you get that negative piece of feedback and maybe your confidence is feeling a little bit shattered, go back to the person who gave you that feedback after you've had time to digest it, maybe even after you've had time to work on it, and to thank the person for sharing it with you. Now, thanking someone for negative feedback is probably the last thing that we want to do. It's the least natural thing that comes to mind, because all we want to do is preserve our standing and our dignity, right? You took that from me and I want to reclaim it. But when you thank someone for sharing that negative piece of feedback about you, or that corrective piece of feedback, then they've given you something that you didn't have before, and that's an insight. And we can't get better without these insights. And these insights are all around us, but they're not hitting our dashboards. So the only way to get better is to let those insights come in. And some people, like we said at the top, just aren't all that into giving feedback. They're afraid of what's going to happen next. They're too busy. Whatever the reason is, there's a feedback hesitancy, a reluctance to share that feedback. Scott, if someone's giving you feedback and it's coming from a good place, you want to thank that person and make that person a feedback champion, so that they see two things. Number one, you were serious about what they said, you took it to heart, and that number two, they're willing to listen again. You're willing to listen to what they had to say, and you'll be willing to listen again. You know what's going to happen? They're going to give you feedback the next time something comes up. And so it comes to a question that I had to ask myself, and that, we all kind of have to ask ourselves. Do I want to live in a world where I know what people think about me or not? And so the only way to really know what people think about you is to seek that feedback. And even if you're not ready to do that yet, at least listen when they're ready to share it with you, and then make sure they'll share it again. And the way to do that is by expressing that gratitude.
Well, with that gratitude, when it's relational, when it's a true relationship, it's also extremely valuable because you're building depth in that relationship.
Yeah.
Through struggle, through challenge, you only build a deeper foundational relationship. And it's like the first argument or discussion, negative discussion in a marriage. You get through it, you move on, you're like, okay, we can get through this. Or any friendship, when you find out your friend's an Eagles fan, and you know you have to get over that. You find a way to provide them positive feedback. Now, all jokes aside, though, it's building that relationship from the ground up, and
Yeah.
someone that cares enough about you from a great place that met you where you are, it does deserve gratitude. I also have found because I'm so relationship driven, and it's extremely important to me that you don't treat me as a transaction, that when I see transactional feedback, I am also highly aware that I'm probably in the wrong room. I
Mm.
may be with some of the wrong people. I may
Mm.
not be in the environment that I need to be in, and I make adjustments or changes. And I think that is a great awareness as well, that when I feel that somebody is not coming at it from a place of trying to help me or meet me where I'm at or get better, that's a really big win for me.
Yeah. And so feedback is that truth serum, right? That really separates relationships from just ratings. And we know when someone's just trying to fix us versus trying to support us. And a rating tells a very small picture of who someone is or was in a particular moment. But a relationship, that is something that is fluid and adaptable, and ultimately is fit to the moment. It meets the moment. And when we find people who are willing to share feedback like that, we want to bring those people closer. And we want to be those kinds of people for others in our lives, whether that's in our work lives or in our home lives. Uh, the things that we can do to improve those relationships, they're often so small, but they're so significant. And if we take the time and energy to work on giving and receiving feedback in a way that is relationships first, then we'll learn a lot about ourselves. We'll also learn a lot about the people around us. And ultimately, not only will we do better work, but the quality of the relationships that we have with the people we work with the people we live with, they will improve as well.
So for the people listening right now, let's say that they want to be better at this. They want to we've talked a lot about relationships, we've talked about some techniques. What's one place to start? Is there a place where you know somebody that's talking to you and they say, I've never been really great at giving feedback and I've always been uncomfortable with it. What's something that I can be aware of, to get better at this, to start something that I can build the relationship and deliver and meet them where they're at, but how do I start there?
So let's go back to humility and curiosity and clarity, right? So it's the humility to say, I don't know everything. So this know it all approach to giving feedback often fails and is met with resistance because we don't know everything. We should be a learn it all, not a know it all. We should be, along those same lines, curious to really understand where this person is. And so asking questions and assuming less and trying to understand more is very helpful. But also the clarity to know what is my intent and what is my purpose. What am I trying to do here with this feedback? Why am I sharing it? And what do I hope will happen next? And if we can kind of self-check and calibrate before we give feedback, that's a great place to be in when you do have that conversation, because you've been really clear with yourself first. And when you're clear with yourself, you can be clear with other people. You can let them know, here's why I want to talk about this, and here's why I care about this, and here's why I care about you. And now I really want to have a conversation about where we can go together next. Together. That's the key thing. And so treating feedback as a relationship, but also treating it as an exercise in really understanding what you want out of that feedback. I think that's a good place to begin. And it doesn't take all the fear out of these conversations, but it definitely contains it. And it puts the feedback in a place where it can actually be constructive and productive.
So you're delivering this all over the world. You do keynotes globally. You're helping companies. What's one constant message that you hear, from these keynotes? People come up to you afterwards and they always want to talk, right? They want to. There's a couple people that it really connected with. What do you hear the most? Is there something that kind of resonates often, that stands out after you deliver a presentation or a speech?
Yeah, I think one message that I share often is that feedback is a choice. It's a choice to look back on a past that people can't change, or to look forward to a future that people can. And we get to make that choice with every conversation that we have. And if we want these conversations to count, and that's what people want to know, right? How do I make these conversations count? We have limited time. We have limited bandwidth. We have just in time issues that need to be addressed. How do I make the feedback count? And so I tell them, look, it's not about counting time from one conversation to the next. It's about making the time count. It's about having these conversations in a way that leaves people feeling like more of themselves and not like less of themselves, about approaching as a partner and not just a power broker, about treating feedback as a relationship and not just a rating. But at the end of the day, it's this choice that we get to make. And it's a choice that really determines not just the fate of that conversation, but the future of that relationship. And it's such a simple choice, because if we choose the future and not the past, if we choose partnership and not power, if we choose relationships and not ratings, if we choose agency, not just accountability, then we're choosing to put people before practices, to put people before policies, to put people at the center of these conversations, and to let them know feedback is not just a way to show you how much I know. It's a way to show you how much I care. And when we care about people, then people will care about themselves and the work they do.
It's great, and it's interesting to me because we started this conversation off with football, so I'm gonna bring it full circle. It's interesting to me because I think that Jerry Jones, as we were talking about the differences and the gaps between the Eagles organization winning the Super Bowl and the Cowboys, having winning
Having
seasons, but not
won.
having won for they won for years, but they
They
haven't
did.
been
They
able to
did.
win. They haven't been able to win in the big games. Now, one could argue the NFL likes to take them away from us, but that's okay. The Des Bryant catch and
Sure.
multiple things that still that gives me a pit in my stomach. Not feedback, that gives me a pit in my stomach. But when I think of Jerry, I think of reading the newspapers about Micah Parsons,
Mhm.
and I see Jerry wants to have a one-on-one conversation, a relationship with the player, and the player has to identify whether or not he's actually doing it to manipulate and tactically defeat him, or if he's actually trying to build it as a relationship. And I think when you see those things kind of falter, like we have in the media recently with Micah and Jerry, obviously it seems to me like Micah Parsons feels like Jerry's manipulating him and not trying to focus on the relationship, where Jerry was trying to make it out like he was the relationship. And it's super interesting to me.
Yeah, trust is very hard to earn and very easy to spend. And feedback is a trust game. It is a relationship game, and it takes time. But what I would tell folks out there listening is that the best place to start is just to start and begin with your very next conversation. Make that conversation the best one you've had yet with that person. And if there is a strain on that relationship from previous conversations, or there's a trust deficit in the relationship, then acknowledge it and say, look, we have a history here. And some of these conversations have not gone great. And I'm prepared to own my part of that. But I'd like to start fresh. I want to start building trust. And the way that I want to do that is by giving you what I believe to be the facts as I see them, as I understand them, the conditions that I see on the ground right now. I want to share with you what I see. And then I'm going to listen really deeply to what you have to say. And then I just want to talk. And I promise you this, I may not agree with you, but I am going to listen. And that very important tone shift in feedback of committing to at least bring the best intentions to the conversation. You may not get the outcome that you want, but you're going to create the opportunity for the next conversation. And the key with feedback, like all relationships, is just to keep talking. So keep talking and there'll be progress.
Hopefully they're making that progress in the trust so that he can come after that line of yours. But at the end of the day, it's going to be a fun year of football. Joe, where do people find you? How do they get more of you? Read your book. What do we do to find you today? And
Best
we'll put it
place
all in the
to,
show notes too.
thank you. Best place to find all ways to make feedback fearless is at my website, joehirsch.me. I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn as well. And feedback is a choice and it's a chance. It's a chance to make things better for us and for everyone around us.
Well, Joe, it's been an honor and a pleasure to have you. I love talking with you, I look forward to following the journey and connecting in the future. Thanks again for being on the show.
Thanks, Scott.
I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you liked it, there's more where this one came from. Click here and enjoy some more.